Good evening. Last week we saw the ugly face of racism in America. This week we look at a similar phenomenon in Russia. When Boris Yeltsin seemingly single-handedly defeated the last-ditch coup against Gorbachev's perestroika, he emerged as the man who would complete the dismantling of the old Soviet empire and was determined to usher in Western-style democracy and capitalism as fast as possible. Back in those heady days, no one imagined that just a few years later, the Russian people would be increasingly mourning the old days and yearning for the return of strong leadership. All over the old empire, in the newly independent republics, bloody nationalism exploded as soon as Moscow loosened its iron grip. In Russia itself, falling living standards, rising crime, and a wholesale breakdown of law and order have given birth to numerous right-wing political parties calling for an end to Yeltsin's reforms and the creation of a strong and pure Russia cleansed of foreigners. In 1993, Yeltsin defeated yet another attempt to turn back the clock and bombarded Vice President Rutskoy and his nationalist supporters into a humiliating surrender. But only a few months later, in the elections of December 1993, called by Yeltsin in the hope of renewing his mandate for radical reforms, it was Vladimir Zhirinovsky and his so-called Liberal Democratic Party who emerged as the real victors. 28% of the people voted for the man who threatens the West with nuclear annihilation, criminals with instant execution, and foreigners who besmirch the purity of Mother Russia with expulsion. This fearful racism at the heart of nationalism and fascism has a new champion, and Vladimir Zhirinovsky could well be Russia's next president.
Мы в состоянии болота, где взбаламутили воду, подняли все, что есть гадкого на дне, все это всплыло, и люди мучаются. Поэтому самое главное, нету диагноза, нету формулы, концепции развития, и ничего не говорится, как и что будет.
The film you are about to see reflects the growing mood of disillusionment among young Russians in an unholy alliance between rock music and politics. Germany's Nazi past seems to offer them more hope than the painful and chaotic road to a Western-style democracy.
Россия – великая страна, держава от океана до океана, создана политической волей русского народа, который всегда был мозгом и становым хребтом государства российского. Не будет русских, не будет и России.
This is a Nazi political rally in the main square of St. Petersburg, Leningrad. You see the red flag? That's supposed to be the opposite of fascism. Yet everything you see happening here is permeated with the spirit of the Nazis. It tells you all you need to know about the kind of government and civil administration that we've got ourselves landed with when the mayor of Leningrad allows these Nazis and fascists to hold a public meeting in the main square of the capital of the revolution. If we go on as we are doing with the impoverishment of our country, what you see here is going to become commonplace. These Nazis are now openly publishing more than 60 fascist newspapers. They are openly propagating genocide, the killing of undesirable people and even whole nations. We are heading towards a catastrophe. The next Russian revolution will be a Nazi revolution for sure.
Это первый русский нацистский журнал.
This is the first Russian Nazi magazine. It is the official publication of the Right Radical Party. In Europe, there are lots of right-wing parties. Deutsche Volksunion in Germany, the Front National in France. In Russia, We also have a right-wing nationalist movement, and every day more people turn to these parties. This is the first Russian newspaper to openly propagate right-wing nationalist policies. This newspaper is called The Axe.
К топору. Дверь открыть.
Most Russian youngsters, no matter who they are, well-educated or badly educated, working class or nomenclatura, are quite racist. I mean, this is a very racist society. And natives of Moscow, they hate, Azeris and Georgians and Chechens who live and work here. And of course, they also, they don't like refugees from Asia and Africa, and we often have different kinds of minor racial clashes.
In Russia, there is a close relationship between politics and music, and most particularly in the last 30 years with rock music. In the 70s and 80s in particular, rock music had a role to play in fighting the totalitarian regime. It has a tradition of being used and exploited by opponents to established power. To young people here, the music never lost its effect, its kind of primitive intoxication, which the totalitarian system found very threatening. The communists were not able to tolerate anything, any power or influence that diverted from communism. They forbade everything that could have liberated people from their ideology. There's this saying which was popular amongst punks. Better to fall face down in shit than get involved or get corrupted by politics. I personally find it distressing that after 10 years of persecution under the communists, after constant harassment and worse from the KGB, and just when we thought all that had come to an end, here we are again, fighting a system that oppresses us and the Russian people. It's a depressing business, but believe me or not, I feel a certain kind of responsibility, a shared responsibility with everyone who listens to our music for the fate of our country and our people. So I try to help in a certain sense, even if it is only criticizing, even if it is only a spiritual opposition.
Pauk, as the leader of Corrosia Metallika, he's an honest guy, and he's young and open to new ideas. And like all real rockers, he felt the need to talk about certain problems like, well, for example, nationalistic problems in Moscow, for instance. Something which affects people's everyday lives, but the violence of the Caucasians and so forth. It's not that he's a racist, or even that it's a racist problem. They didn't invent the problem. Not even the politicians invented the problem. It's life, and that's what rock and roll is about.
Не от политики это идет, а от жизни.
I didn't get involved with nationalist politics for fun. The so-called democratic revolution over the past few years has plunged our whole way of life into chaos, when what the Russian people need is stability. If we had stability, or even if there was a democratic alternative to this chaos, I would have no desire to get involved. Everyone involved in the political and parliamentary system in this country are self-interested buffoons. These people are just not interested in the prosperity and progress of our country and our people, only in their own businesses. They conduct both through bribery and clumsy corruption. The nationalist movement is our only hope, and I feel that it's a patriotic duty to get involved with that.
This sense of being against the establishment, being against the police, being against the power is in the blood of rock musicians. Now when suddenly there's no big totalitarian enemy, they feel really lost, and they still are looking for an enemy. They are still looking for a gang to join to fight the establishment. And of course the right wing, they very cynically they use this rock and roll sentiment.
I am late on train and 3 minutes.
I became interested in the nationalist politics of people like Edward Limonov because the nationalists believe in the Russian nation and the Russian people, not personal advancement. His party decided to put me forward as a candidate in the mayoral elections to show our contempt for the kinds of people we have in power. It was a large campaign.
I had an idea to present him as our candidate from National Radical Party to the elections of the mayor of the city of Moscow, and he gave his approval. It was widely publicized, that story, but the serious reason why I choose is, if I know, he's 26 years old. He's the son of a Russian historian, very intelligent, very known person, and he himself is unusually for a rocker. I found him very, very much intelligent, and we wanted to express our protest against this corrupted election of a mayor, where it was about 20 candidates and all just criminals, who already proved their corruption.
The campaign showed that the people would be willing to vote for me. The people of Moscow have utter distaste and contempt for the ruling elite. They showed that they would rather vote for a heavy metal rock star than continue with the chaos and injustice that the Democrats and Communists have dumped upon us. None of these people are the leaders that Russia needs. People would prefer to vote for a return to patriotism and nationhood, or even at worse, they see that there's no democratic alternative and would vote for me simply as a protest.
We played an active role in proposing Pauk as a mayor of Moscow, and we publicized his election program in the Den newspaper. In the West, things like that happen quite often, that well-known musicians or show business personalities get themselves involved in political events, just for the sake of their own image and publicity. But what is sure is that Pauk would have taken lots of votes from some well-known politicians, and then he would have become a political personality. Stranger things happen in life. As an opposition newspaper, we need to attract young people. Hundreds of thousands of young people read our paper. So we have to interest ourselves in the things that the young people are interested in. It's not by chance that Den is one of the most popular papers amongst students. Maybe they don't start off reading the academic or political articles. They start with the rock columns or the articles about youth culture. But they get round to the serious stuff later, that's for sure. Seems a paradox, but at least half of the leaders of well-known rock groups are people with patriotic convictions or nationalistic convictions, and often extreme right-wing and fascistic ideas.
Жил Владимир Ильич Ленин, маялся сред заснеженной кукольной декорации, играл на бильярде в новом кабаре.
Давай сюда! А где картошка? Кончилась? Продала вот всю ночь. Блядь, у кого водка есть? Вот.
Подождите, дайте пройти. Она и так не
Когда я ехал, в общем-то, ну...
Let me tell you the simple facts of the situation. The meal we just ate cost about 39,000 coupons, let's say about $18 US. The salary of an ordinary soldier in the army is 30,000 coupons a month, which is about $13 US a month. Let anyone tell me how the hell you can have stability or order in a country where a man who is willing to lay down his life for the country has to live on $13 US a month.
The right in Russia it's been always with one meaning. It means nationalist. It means Russia for Russians. We want the Russian state in which all Russians will live. We don't want liberal economy. We want our national economical revolution for all the classes of population. Now we have the very unstable proportion of 80% of the poor in this country, about 5% of the filthy rich, and about the 15% of the middle class. That is a very, very unstable proportion. The society with such proportion cannot survive.
The Sunaref, or the bloody foreigners, are the people mainly from the south, but any non-whites who attack white civilization.
Следующая песня посвящается всем, так сказать, российским людям и, так сказать, медалистам, которые ведут борьбу с ненавистными цулярафами, блядь!
We don't care if you're talking about Armenians, or Georgians, or anybody else. It's a type of person. You have white races, yellow races, and black races. Simple as that. They're leaving their own country because they want a better life. So they come here and steal from us. Every year, these people are stealing more and more money from us with their restaurants and stalls and brothels. With money, you can do everything. That means that the decent and honest white people are under threat. Firstly, all the republics must be separated from Russia with barbed wire, so that we can strictly control the numbers coming into the country. And secondly, if these Caucasians want to do any business with us Russians, they must pay higher taxes, and the police must be given special powers to keep them under control.
Вот давай, снимай меня. Я говорю, гнать надо всех черных отсюда прям запросто. Вот этих, блядь, жуликов, кто торгует, а мне купить нечего на 100 рублей. Я пенсионер.
Hitler is my hero because he set himself certain goals in life and achieved them. He didn't betray his people because he cared only about his own nation. I don't see anything like that here. There is not one leader here in Russia who sees Russia and the Russians as the national priority. They just don't care about the Russian people. That's why the Russian nation is falling apart. Every Russian is encouraged to take care only of himself. Nobody takes care of each other.
Каждый русский человек, каждый за себя.
Русские, славяне, содействовники. Митинг русской партии, посвященный Дню национального сопротивления, Дню начала Великой войны, Дню великой трагедии русского народа.
There is culture and pseudo-culture, like there's classical art on the one hand and abstract art on the other. That is art that has degenerated. So there is Russian culture and Soviet culture, which is nothing but a pseudo-culture. It doesn't represent any part of the organic being of the Russian people. Look at today. 70 years of the Soviet man blown away in less than a year. Nothing left but chaos, and all they're trying to do is fill the gap with consumer articles and shit from the West. The great Russian people doesn't need nor want this. The great Russian people are interested in the national idea. We want our own Russian way of life, our own Russian soul. Because the core of the Russian way of life is the soul, and the soul is the conscience.
The genotype of the Russian people is mixed with blood of, how to call them, representatives of other races and nationalities. That is a very big problem for our party. That's why it is of great importance that there should be a precise law on citizenship, in order to make it absolutely clear who is pure Russian and who isn't. We also need to do a big scientific survey, involving different scientists like anthropologists, geneticists, sociologists, psychologists, in order to establish if genetical contact between different races has positive or negative effects. We're pretty certain that this will prove that this contact has negative effects. So the artificial selection of the most intelligent people must be a fundamental principle of our party.
As a priority in the new Russia, our army must guarantee order in the country. Because, psychologically speaking, Russian people are completely different from Westerners.
Наше движение, которое называется «Русское националистов», все вы это знаете, Главной целью является обеспечение будущего нашего народа.
Our future will be secure in the hands of our army. The army has always played a special role. In the old days, the army was always respected and honoured, and the people in the army seen as the elite, because they were willing to sacrifice themselves for the fatherland. It should be the most honourable profession. To be an officer in the army, or a teacher, those will be the most honourable professions in the Russia of the future. While I was serving in the army, of course, I talked about my convictions with like-minded officers. There were a lot of them who supported me. I can even say that the majority of them shared my convictions. In fact, only one or two didn't agree with my convictions. Because of sloppiness and a lack of patriotism in the Soviet army, there was a suppression against patriotic and committed soldiers like myself, and we were dismissed from the Soviet army.
We will achieve what Hitler achieved and more. That's why I think that the stereotype that they try to make us believe, that fascism would be equal to killing, concentration camps and brutality, that is just not true. The thing I found most interesting in Mein Kampf was how Hitler describes organizational principles, how to organize a party, a strong, militarily strong party, a paramilitary political party. That's the thing I found most interesting in Mein Kampf.
History changes here every day, and you cannot do what was possible in 89, for example, or in 87. In 87, I believe the completely bloodless solution was possible. Today is not possible. We are not initiators of all this. We are a defensive nationalism. It's not even nationalism, because we are civilization. As a civilization that is next to us, that is a German civilization, Anglo-Saxon civilization, and as a civilization, we Russians, we have our rights, and we want to others to respect our rights. Our basic goal is to create the national, finally national state and national government, and for that we want the national revolution. The only mean to do it is a national revolution. And we're talking about the nation of 150 million. We're the biggest in Europe. We are not afraid of anything.
Russia is acting like a kind of buffer now, a buffer zone in between the white, civilized world and the uncivilized East. We're enduring an invasion of pagan people. It's the same as what happened with the Roman Empire, when a huge amount of pagans poured in torrents from the northern countries and Muslims from the east, and destroyed a glorious empire. Today it's the same thing all over again. We're engaged in a holy war.
To explore the ominous implications of the film we have just seen for Russia and the rest of the world, I have with me Dennis Healy, elder statesman, a former government minister, and old enough to have witnessed the rise of Nazi fascism in Germany. Galina Starovoitova, an early and close advisor to Boris Yeltsin and chairperson of the Democratic Party of Russia, and Alexei Bartogov, who is the chief political advisor to Vladimir Zhirinovsky. But first, let's hear from Vladimir Zhirinovsky himself, to whom we spoke in Moscow, especially for this program. Just what does he really stand for, and what are his aspirations for Russia?
Итог иностранцев и их нахождения в России, потому что мы сейчас не до гостей нам. Нам нужно улучшить жизнь наших людей. Поэтому в этом смысле нам сейчас не до туризма, и тем более не до дикого туризма, когда приезжает любой человек с любым паспортом, делает любые действия и уезжает. Большинство приезжающих — это проходимцы, авантюристы, лица с уголовным прошлым. Надо закрыть границы для въезда свободного. Для выезда не должны закрываться. Пусть наши граждане выезжают при наличии паспорта и других условий соблюдения, но для въезда границы должны быть закрыты. Надо закрыть их в физическом смысле этого слова. Поставить шлагбаумы, протянуть колючую проволоку, сделать рвы, там, пограничную полосу, наряды пограничников, все технические средства бросить на обеспечение невозможности перехода границы, прервать определенные связи с отдельными регионами, что будет предотвращать приезд в Россию нежелательных элементов. Возможности есть, нет желания, как борьба с преступностью. У нас есть законодательство, есть армия, милиция, вооруженные силы, оружие, все есть, нету желания бороться. Поэтому вопрос о политической воле. Пока у нас будет нынешнее политическое руководство, мы ни одну проблему не решим. Западная демократия, она имеет минусы для нас, то, что она не имеет национальной окраски. Вот, скажем, немцы сегодня задыхаются от притока иностранцев. Там любой иностранец получает любое пособие, живет спокойно, лучше, чем немец или французы. Поэтому она стала сама себя уничтожать, эта демократия. Нужно обязательно какие-то ограничения. Не может быть демократии без конца и края. Поэтому западная демократия, она ведет к гибели той цивилизации, которую создала. Это естественный процесс. Все цивилизации создаются и гибнут. Поэтому чем шире демократия, тем больше опасностей для ее гибели. Меньше демократия, но здесь ущемляются, может быть, чьи-то права, но более здоровое государство, более долговечное. Поэтому нужно выбирать две модели развития. Поэтому здесь у нас должно быть все собственное. Мы не должны принимать, пусть Запад от нас принимает. Запад тоже гибнет, я вас уверяю. Франция и Турция задохнутся от турок и арабов. Через 10 лет они нас будут просить о помощи. Через 10 лет к нам будут ехать в Москву, просить: спасите нас, французов, нас, немцев. Поэтому нам не нужно ни о чем думать. Они у нас должны учиться и демократии, и искусству воевать, и борьбы с нашествиями, так сказать, иноземцев.
Let me first go to you, Dennis Healy. You saw the film. What's your reaction?
Well, first of all, I think youth all over the Western world often behaves like that. You have these wild rock and pop groups, some of which have the most scary ideas about society and so on. What you don't have in most Western countries is these groups with a clear, or let's say a very strong political program, and being prepared to train to defend it with weapons. And that I found rather disturbing
Definitely it is. I am quite agree with Denis that pro-fascistic groups exist across the globe, especially in Europe. As, several members of parliament were elected in Germany, in Italy, in other countries. Even in Britain you have some strong and radical nationalists. But the difference between these groups and our fascists are not a quantitative one. It is first of all the qualitative one, because our fascists were successful enough to shape their influential and sizable political faction in the parliament. That means they received the access to mass media. Against the background of economic crisis, it is a real threat for our newborn democracy.
How would you describe this economic crisis?
We have several spirals of inflation during last years. We are in the middle of the process of privatization, and I don't think the economic reason is the most important cause for the increasing of nationalistic feelings. More important is the loss of common values after breakdown of communism. People are disoriented and they are rather looking for some new system of values, and it's very simple to replace the old system by the nationalistic values. That's why some disoriented and disappointed people voted for Mr. Zhirinovsky.
You are spokesman for Vladimir Zhirinovsky. I want to ask this, without insulting anyone. This image of a buffoon, of a clown, which is all pervasive in the West, I can tell you. Is that the real Zhirinovsky? Is there somebody else behind that?
Zhirinovsky, very clever man, very smart man. He knows what he wants, and I think he will be president. I think he will be president. I know in our country the most newspapers, television, not in the hands of the supporters of Zhirinovsky. Yeah, it's right.
Yes, it's right.
Yes, and the image of him is, I think it's not correct. It's understandable. It's not correct.
But he has, if I may say so, I mean, he's been widely quoted as saying that he wants the Russian soldiers to wash their feet in the Indian Ocean. He's prepared to nuke Japan, was the word he used. He wants to redraw all the national frontiers, not only in what used to be the Soviet Union, but in Eastern Europe as well. And he wants an alliance with a new Nazi Germany. Now, those are the statements of a man who is either clowning or very dangerous indeed.
He's not conservative or very leftist or fascist. No, he is not fascist. He is liberal democratic. Liberal, it means for freedom. Democratic means for power of the people. And he tried to be this, tried to keep this way.
You're presenting, Alexei, you're presenting Zhirinovsky as a mild and reasonable nationalist, when in fact he's been making some pretty extreme statements. Let me give you an example. He says he will expel all foreigners from Russia. He doesn't want any more foreigners coming into Russia. He will erect a barbed wire fence around Russia to isolate it from the rest of the world. Then he says about the West. The West will come crawling on its knees to Russia to learn about economics.
When he said about foreigners, he means foreigners, under this word, he means people who live in Baltic republics, in Caucasus republics, and others. You know that Baltic republics cannot survive without help of Russia. But now the businessmen from these republics steal raw materials from Russia and sell it to the West. These criminal actions. And present government of Russia cannot stop it. And Zhirinovsky said that these foreigners will be expelled. And about West, crawling on knees, he said that we don't need advisors. We must decide our problem ourselves. And if we shall decide our problem ourselves, the Western countries will see that we are very powerful with high living standard of people. It is a future. It's our dream. But we are not against West.
Surely Alexei is right in saying that wounded national pride is a very important factor behind Zhirinovsky's rise to power, and this is equally true of similar movements elsewhere, and not only of fascist movements. And I think one of the features of the world we're now moving into in the next century is that finance and investment are now globalized. People put up factories wherever they can get the relevant labor cheapest and closer to the market they want to sell in. Money moves up to $1,000 billion a year across the exchange of whatever national governments want. And in this situation, the power of national governments to control their nation's destiny is questionable. And the result is you get a revival of nationalism, often supported by religious feeling.
Let me ask you, how does your party differ from Zhirinovsky's?
We are on the opposite poles of political spectrum.
Give us some detail.
We are real liberals, but Mr. Zhirinovsky's party was shaped, and it was very clever to take this name, liberal and democracy, but this party has nothing to do with liberalism or democracy from my point of view. Our party entitled Democratic Russia, and it is a party which led President Yeltsin into his office. And we support the free market economy, the creation of Commonwealth of independent states, following the example of British Commonwealth. And we support the ideology of human rights, rights of ethnic minorities, and right for self-determination for newly independent states. We recognized immediately the independence of Baltics, Ukraine, and other republics, and we are sure that all these countries can survive without Russia.
Do you believe, does your party believe in the right of the states, former states of the Soviet Union, to be independent?
Every country have right to be independent, but no country have right to steal, to rob another country. I understand the right of minority, but what about the right of majority?
But we're talking about nationalism. It's a little bit complicated, another question, and that it's a long talk.
Okay, nationalism. I told you that Zhirinovsky is not nationalist. He is patriot. I told you about the difference. Patriot loves his country. Nationalist hate other nations.
Zhirinovsky likes other nations, and you do.
Why likes? Zhirinovsky loves his country.
And
like
other
me.
nations?
And he didn't hate other nations.
What strikes me about the modern world is that self-determination on a national basis is a recipe for ethnic cleansing and war. We can see that in what used to be the Soviet Union, we see it in Yugoslavia, we see it in many other parts of the world, and somehow or other, and this is the failure, I think, of politicians, both in Russia and in the West, we've got to find a way, and we're trying to do it in the European Union, by which countries can maintain their national identity, their cultural identity, without insisting on controlling everybody who hasn't the same cultural identity within their own frontiers.
Galina, Alexei is professing a moderate nationalism, something that you seem on all fours with, that you don't need to object to.
First of all, I cannot agree with this statement. I don't know if Alexei himself will agree. Alexei was until recent the publisher and editor-in-chief of extremistic nationalistic newspaper Русское Воскресенье, which we, our party, consider as a pro-fascistic, much more radical than Zhirinovsky party. And Alexei was imprisoned for that, and his newspaper is restricted now. But he was released from the prison because of his health, as I understood from his words now. And I cannot consider him as a moderate. He just had no opportunity to express his states, his visions here.
Have you read the paper?
Yes, definitely.
What sort of things?
Pro-fascistic paper with some sort of swastika, with claims about Russian superiority, against Zionist conspiracy, against Zionist and Jewish people, which are called by different names, Judas, not Jews, but some accusation, bad and dirty words which exist in Russian, among Russian anti-Semites for these people. And I have a collection of these, some issues of this newspaper. When being ethnologist by training, I make my research devoted to Russian fascists. Normally I use this newspaper. That is why I was surprised to meet with the editor-in-chief of this newspaper here in Britain. It is the only chance for us to sit on the same round table. In Russia, it's impossible.
You wouldn't sit with him in Russia?
No.
In my newspaper, there was no word Zionism. No word. Zionist conspiracy, there was no. I am not against Jews. I had very many friends, Jews. I have it now. I have no enemy.
It's the usual
Jew.
argument
No-
of any
no enemy.
anti-Semite that I personally have some friends among Jews. It's interesting that Mr. Zhirinovsky is trying to involve into his grassroots movement such different persons from the right-wing, extremistic wing of political spectrum.
And from left wing too.
From left wing, who, for example, is from left wing? All the communists who supported him, even Lukyanov, they now against him.
Let me just finally tie this up by putting one question to all of you. Does it seem now inevitable that all the difficulties of migration, all the difficulties of crime, all the difficulties of conflict, ethnic conflict, is inevitably leading to, they are all leading to a virulent nationalism which threatens the security of Europe, as Zhirinovsky might well do?
Zhirinovsky said that Russian troops will be no sent in any country without asking of people of that country to help.
I think that we're at the beginning of a process such as a really cataclysmic change, such as made Europe a very turbulent area for at least 60 years after the French Revolution, and some people would say went on until the First World War. And I think the changes in the modern world are very much greater than those that followed the French Revolution, and more dangerous in the sense that we've got weapons of mass destruction, means of carrying them halfway around the world in missiles and aircraft, which make the dangers greater. But we do see wars now in the southern part of what used to be the Soviet Union, in the Balkans, and it is a danger, and it's our main task, I think, as decent people, to try to find ways of halting it.
Finally, Galina?
I think, yes, it is a real threat, and it is one of the inevitable consequences of this virulent and violent nationalism, one of the consequences of all these factors which you mentioned about. But and I think it's a good time to establish the international cooperation against fascism, especially in Europe. We are concerned about that. Probably it's time to establish some sort of international anti-fascist front like it was several decades ago. Now it's time to establish such international organization to protect the peace in the continent.
Okay,
Please.
thank you.
Please, may I?
Thank you, Galina. Thank you, Denisili.
Yes.
Thank you, Alexei.
Yes.